The morning of October 9, 1992, in Klaipėda was peaceful. A 4-year-old girl watched her 27-year-old mother, Tatjana, working at home. She didn't fully understand everything happening around her, but she was a happy child, quietly mumbling to herself as she played around the home, playing with her favorite toys. She already knew what a knock on the door meant. It was a sign that a visitor has arrived. Maybe someone familiar, or perhaps a new face she would need to observe and study. At 10 o'clock in the morning, a man entered. The 4-year-old girl had seen him before, many times. Her mother, Tatjana, greeted the man and put on some coffee. The house was soon filled with familiar aroma, and the man seemed to be discussing something with Tatjana. The girl, still running around the house playfully, didn't notice when the man pulled out a bottle of alcohol. Her mother didn't refuse a drink, and not just one glass. But the morning continued as it were any other day. The man asked Tatjana for something about foreign currency. Tatjana searched the house but couldn't find what he was asking for. The man then suggested Tatjana go and ask the neighbor. Maybe she had what he needs. Tatjana, already slightly tipsy, quickly got up and cheerfully stepped out of the door. The girl had no time to process what was happening, but suddenly the man, who had just been sitting in the kitchen, was now right next to her. He grabbed her, squeezing her small shoulders tightly. Against an adult man, she had no chance to resist. He already had a rope, which he painfully tied around her hands. Her entire world flipped upside down in a second. But her mother would come back soon. Maybe this was just a scare. Maybe she simply didn't understand what was happening. However, when Tatjana stepped back inside, the situation only got worse. She began screaming, demanding to know what the man, this animal, was doing. The girl was still in shock, unable to move or scream, as the man shoved her to the ground and then, like a monster, lunged at her mother. Even at 4 years old and paralyzed by fear, she understood that there was a knife in this man's hands. And on her mother's face, indescribable terror. The man attacked, plunging the knife into Tatjana's stomach in one swift motion. But Tatjana didn't give up. She shoved the man with all her strength and tried to run, screaming, calling for any kind of help. But the monster was faster. The girl could only watch as the killer drove the knife into her mother's neck. The man was now consumed by inhuman rage. He lifted the knife, and even though Tatjana was barely moving, he stabbed her again and again and again and again. When the killer was finally satisfied with his work, the girl snapped out of her shock, somehow understanding, even at such a young age, that she would be next. She started crying, an action that until now has always meant help. But today, no help would arrive. Today, this 4-year-old girl will experience one of the most horrific deaths. Her mouth and nose were covered with medical tape, and then she was hidden inside a bedding box under the sofa. Fear, paralyzing thoughts, unbearable terror etched into her mind. She tried to fight, but at just 4 years old, she was too weak. It was useless. She was trapped, helpless, locked in the darkness. Eventually, she suffocated, completely alone, repeating her mother's name, while the killer calmly drank the remaining bottle of vodka. Vladimir Ivanov was born in June 1963 in Klaipėda. As a child, he was unremarkable, and after completing 8 years of school, he chose a vocational school, where he trained as a turner. At 18, he got married and had a son. However, family life didn't last long. Soon, he was drafted into the Soviet army. His service was also short-lived. "I found out that my wife's brother was blackmailing my parents, so I left my unit to confront him," Ivanov later recalled. For desertion, a military tribunal sentenced him to 2 years in a disciplinary battalion. After serving his sentence, his family fell apart. His wife left him, and he had to pay child support. Ivanov tried working, but that lifestyle didn't suit him, so he chose an easier way to make living: theft. However, he didn't manage to stay hidden for long. After just a few crimes, he was caught and sentenced to 6 years. While imprisoned in the Arkhangelsk region, he suffered abuse and humiliation from other inmates, leaving a deep scar on his psyche. "I became very quick-tempered in prison," he later admitted. In the spring of 1992, he returned to Lithuania. He found himself in a country that had changed significantly, but he himself had not changed. He tried working in construction, but he couldn't maintain discipline and was fired after a few months. Without a steady income, he returned to theft. In the free time, he often visited his aunt, where he enjoyed reading foreign magazines. During one of these visits, he met his aunt's neighbor, Tatjana. She immediately caught his eye. "I really liked her," Ivanov admitted, saying that he even tried to seduce her. Tatjana, a single mother raising a 4-year-old daughter, was not charmed by his attention, but didn't push him away either. They often spent time together at her apartment. At the same time, Ivanov tried to involve his cousin, Alexander. Vladimir repeatedly suggested robbing some apartments. His plan was to read classified ads about items for sale, go to the listed addresses, and steal the items, but I always refused, his cousin later told the investigators. On October 11, 1992, Ivanov visited Alexandra's again, this time with a specific plan: to rob Tatjana's apartment. Since he had visited often, he had already taken note of valuable items. He had already been to her place, ready to do it, but there were too many people, so it didn't work out, his cousin testified. However, Alexandras refused again. 2 days later, Ivanov decided to act alone. He went to Tatjana's apartment, where they had coffee together. "I pulled out a bottle of cognac. She didn't refuse, and we drank," he said. He then asked Tatjana if she had any US dollars to sell. She replied that she only had 5 banknotes. "I asked her to go ask her neighbor. While she was gone, I tied up her daughter," he admitted. "When she returned, she started screaming hysterically, demanding that I release her child. I pulled out a knife and stabbed her. She tried to run, screaming that I was a bastard, a scumbag. I caught up with her and stabbed her in the neck." Forensic experts determined that Ivanov stabbed Tatjana 10 times. "When Tatjana fell to the ground, I felt sick. Fear took over," he recalled. Then the little girl started crying. Ivanov coldly covered her mouth with medical tape and stuffed her into the bedding compartment under the sofa. The child suffocated to death. Then ransacked the apartment, searching for valuables. He took $200, gold rings, jackets, a tape recorder, a vacuum cleaner, and other items he thought he could sell. Finally, he found a bottle of vodka and decided to drink it. Drunk, he contemplated how to escape unnoticed. He made a rope from blankets and considered climbing down the window, but in the evening, he simply walked out of the door. He went to the train station, boarded a train, and fled to Kaliningrad. The next day, he traveled to Moscow, but he couldn't stay hidden for long. While trying to sell stolen goods at a pawn shop, he was arrested. Lithuania law enforcement had already issued a warrant for his arrest, so Ivanov was detained and extradited back to Lithuania. He confessed to the crimes, but attempted to justify his actions. At first, he claimed that Tatjana owed him 100,000 rubles, and when she refused to return the money, he was overcome with rage. However, witnesses confirmed this was a lie. Later, Ivanov tried to shift the blame onto his cousin. "I never intended to kill her. If my cousin had come with me, she would have just handed everything over and lived," he calmly stated. Eventually, he made another chilling statement. "If only she hadn't screamed, I wouldn't have killed her." Stabbing Tatjana 10 times with such hatred clearly went beyond just wanting to rob. This was deep, uncontrollable rage. Some believed that the little girl was alive under the sofa for hours. Despite her suffering, Ivanova showed no remorse. To him, Tatjana's and her daughter's life were mere obstacles, objects he removed without a second thought. In the end, 2 precious lives were reduced to just a few $100s and a vacuum cleaner. Despite the brutality of the crime, Lithuania's law enforcement acted swiftly. Investigators quickly identified the suspect and arrested him. The investigation uncovered the shocking details of the murder, and Ivanov's criminal past linked him with the crime scene. The case reached court in just over 9 months, and on July 21, 1993, he was sentenced to death. The court ruled that his actions were so horrific that the only just punishment was execution. Ivanov's death sentence was carried out extremely quickly. Just 3 months later, on December 12, 1993, he was executed by a firing squad. On the same day, another execution was carried out, that of Valentinas Laskys, convicted of at least 4 murders. I have a video about this right here. Vladimir Ivanov's case remains one of the most horrific in Lithuania's history. A tragic story of cruelty and senseless loss, his actions left deep scars on the victim families and the entire nation. It was hard to cover. The girl was only 4 years old, and she had to suffocate. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, clicking the like button, subscribing, or sharing this video with your friends always gives you karma points. Thanks again, stay safe, stay aware, and I'll see you next time.